you got a great lecture today. I think one of the things that's cool about this class is how, and we hope this works, but what we tried to do, and you're going to get a big dose of it the next few lectures here, is for us to give you some, as Buck has been saying, enough about econ to understand how that influences what we're talking about, enough about history, enough about philosophy, and so you're going to hear from some of Carolina's great faculty members the next few lectures and get really a wonderful introduction to some areas that you may have studied in depth, in which case these will be very comfortable lectures for you, or maybe these are fields in which you haven't taken a class yet, and so we're excited that you're going to get to hear from some great Carolina faculty the next few weeks. So with that, here's John Akin, who's an expert in health economics and been chair of econ for a long time and instrumental in getting the whole entrepreneurship program off the ground. So John, take it away.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I will apologize early because my voice is going. I hope I make it. I've had something for about 3 weeks, so I'll try to talk gently, and you'll have to listen carefully. Economics, you know, how many people here have had an econ course? Most of you, okay. How many have had more than one? Oh, okay. So we'll be preaching to the choir here. We're going to try, to do a few things today. One of the things I was talking about earlier with Buck and Holden is that deciding what to talk about economics in one class was very difficult. I had never done it before. Thought about it. Here's a group of people who are interested in entrepreneurship, interested in how the economy works, et cetera, and I want to tell them a few things from economics in an hour, a little over an hour. And so I made a selection, and here it goes, and let's see if I can figure out how to do this thing. The answer to the poll, I don't know. How many people got it right? Oh, okay. Yeah. How many people got it wrong? Somebody? Nobody? Okay. Good. Back to, entrepreneurial thinking. Let's go through this really quickly. We're today in which? We're in one of the competencies. No, we're in context, sorry. It's also a competency. Today is economics, then we get to history, then we get to philosophy. We keep moving. We will then move into the different kinds of entrepreneurship, commercial, social, scientific arts, and the strategy, accounting, and so forth. But today we're going to talk about economics and about, you'll get another lecture later by a fellow named Peter Koklanis, who's another one of the really good UNC faculty members. He's in the history department. He's been chairman of history for a long time, but he's he's a economic historian. And so he's going to talk to you about sort of the history of entrepreneurship and of entrepreneurs. So a lot of what he's going to say, I'm going to choose not to say today about entrepreneurship in economics, because you'll get it then, you'll get the more historical view. So I'm going to talk more about sort of how the notion of entrepreneurship, the notion of being creative fits into economics. Schumpeter, couldn't start without Schumpeter. Buck mentioned him last time. I was talking to an econ faculty member the other day who was saying he hoped that in the entrepreneurship classes they talked about Schumpeter, because he's the economist who's most known for caring about working on making serious in the profession the notion of entrepreneurship. And he termed the phrase creative destruction. Creative destruction, think about that. It's what you're all about if you're going to be entrepreneurial. It's about the creative part. Often people get upset about the destruction part. You can't come up with new things, you can't come up with innovative things without outdating in some sense the old things, without causing some people to even lose their jobs. So part of what you have in a dynamic economic system, in a dynamic economy, is that not only do new things come along, but old things go away. Jumping the gun a little bit of what I'm going to say later, but part of what fits in here is the bad part of being an entrepreneur, is that entrepreneurs can start businesses that fail, or they can run businesses that fail. So entrepreneurs know all about the destruction part. All begins with resources. Economics is basically that. It's about how do we use resources in an economy to most well serve the people, to make us better off, to make us happier, to feed the poor, etc. But it all comes down to resources, having resources, and especially using them well. So sometimes I think we named our profession badly early on when we named it economics, because lots of people, when they think about economics, think about money, stock market, investing, sort of what comes to their mind. They think about business school. But economics is the social science about how do you use resources. Economics is about economizing. It's about not wasting. So economics is about how do you make decisions with respect to resources that put them to their best use. And that's economizing. It's, we lost one of our pictures. This is supposed to be the three types of resources in an abstraction, in the abstract economics model. It's land, labor, and capital. Land is up on the left, capital is down on the right, labor got lost. Is it on the next one? Oh, okay, I got to click once. All right. Land, labor, capital. I didn't know how this thing works, sorry. Land is not land. Land is natural resources. These are shorthand terms. We put it in a model that there are three kinds of inputs that produce output. So get it cleared off. It's nice to have it clear. People think labor's about labor. They say, we need to, if you increase labor, what will happen? And when the economists are talking, we're not really talking about land, we're talking about any kind of resource. So the coal underground, the air that's out there to use for production, whatever, is all land. Labor is human. Labor is human resources. Capital is anything that's produced. So you use land and labor to produce a machine. A machine is a piece of capital. Capital does not occur naturally. Capital is a category that's meant to be things that you have used resources to produce them. So you use resources to produce capital resources, which can make you more effective, more productive. You wouldn't use resources to create another kind of resource unless using this resource is going to make you more effective. So some people call entrepreneurship a fourth kind of input. Some people call it a subtopic of labor, because entrepreneurs are people. There's no right answer there. It doesn't really change anything as to how you work with the models or anything else, whether you want to call entrepreneurship a fourth category or you want to call it a special category of labor. I'm trying to make the case to you, and as I thought about this, thinking about economics and where we sit and what, to me it is the most important input. If you do not have entrepreneurship, if you do not have somebody bringing the land, labor, capital together and organizing them in ways that produce products, there won't be any products. So if you consider the part of labor of the part of bringing things together and be creative, not just being a worker, then entrepreneurship is the part of the economic inputs that makes everything else happen. It's the part that organizes things. And so I'll leave you, from this class you're going to learn, and we're going to believe it is the most important input. It's the most important resource. Let's go back. Who are these people? Anybody know who they are? These are entrepreneurs. It's worth mentioning them just because these are really important, good people. Zuckerberg, well, some people would say he's important, some people would say he isn't. Facebook. In the middle, you have Jacqueline Novogratz, who started I forget the name of the company, Acumen Fund. Acumen Fund funds entrepreneurs in poor countries in the world. She started out working in Chase Manhattan Bank as an international banker and ending up running a big nonprofit company that funds entrepreneurs who are trying to fix problems in the really poorest places in the world. Mohammed Yunus is even better known. He's won the Nobel Prize. He's an economist. He set up the Grameen Bank in Bangladesh, which makes microcredit loans to mostly women. Part of what Dr. Yunus, Professor Yunus learned was that it seemed to work better in Bangladesh if you loaned the money to the women of the household, not the men, because for various cultural reasons or whatever, they put it to use in educating the children, starting little businesses, doing the kind of things that seem to help productivity more than if you let the loans be made to men. So his program sort of developed into a program in which the women are responsible for the loans. The other thing he did, which is interesting to economists, is that you form a group of like 6 families who are a group in a loan circle. And if someone gets a loan out of your group, you're all responsible for it. So if you don't pay your loan back, the other 5 households who are your partners in a loan network have to pay it back. So there's real peer pressure across the people that, if you don't pay it back, your neighbors will be running over, screaming and yelling that they're going to have to pay it back. So a very unique sort of way of organizing things that really helped on getting the loans paid back. Money, where's another picture? Yeah, money. Money's not a resource. First thing a lot of people would say is money. Money's the resource. Money's capital. I said capital is only things made by human beings. And if you want a shorthand for capital's machines, factories. It's productive things. Money's none of those. Money's really nothing. Money's a computing device. Money is how you trade. You trade one resource for another, but the way we do it in very developed societies is that you trade it for money, then you trade the money for the other resource. But everything's price gets set in terms of money, and it allows you to trade things. You can trade anything for anything else. You can sell it for its money price and buy something else for a money price. So it makes economies work hugely efficiently, but money's just the accounting device. It's the common denominator. For doing economic analysis, being a common denominator is hugely important because we can compare across kinds of goods and services, kinds of resources by comparing their price, which is a dollar money value, because all of them are sold in markets. And when they're sold in markets, that market is compared to another market. Anyone who bought this good gave up the money they could have used to buy another good. So money comes in, but money is the way we quantify things. It's the common denominator. Money is not a resource. Here we get to your poll question. Unlimited wants. I guess all of us want one of those. I'm not even sure what that is, a Lamborghini, something. I would like to have one. Limited resources. Money we put up for resources because money buys any kind of resources. Money is the denominator. Money is the representative of how many resources you own because you can buy them at a certain price. So your money tells you how many resources you own, whether you're using them or not right now. And you know what? This whole thing, right? This slide probably is what bothers a lot of people about economics. It's all about material things. It's about money. It's about selfishness, greed. It's about getting things. And people say, that's who'd want to be an economist? That's really awful. Why don't they think about nice things? And you know, it is. You can't buy a meal for a poor person without earning things, without producing things. You can't make your economy help the people in need without the economy working efficiently. If you don't think about material things, if you don't think about producing, you know, we'll all be running around tying leaves around us and doing whatever. So, you know, there's a truth to the notion that if this is all you think about, if all you think about is the material part of the world, all you think about is goods and services, you probably got a problem. But if you don't think about it, you probably also have a problem. And if you think it's bad, you probably also have a problem, you know? If you think it's bad, you probably wouldn't be in this class. You probably wouldn't be an entrepreneur, even a social entrepreneur. Knows that you have to produce things, you have to bring resources together and use them to do material things. Economics is not about, it's not even about fairness, which bothers a lot of people. It sort of is, because you can use the studies, the analysis about how things work, how to produce more to try to help fix unfairness. But economics is mostly organized about, given the levels of fairness or unfairness, how do you get more produced? So, you know, no apology. It's about how do you try to fulfill the unlimited wants with the limited resources. And some of the unlimited wants are sort of frivolous, but a lot of them aren't. And until we have enough resources in the world to fulfill them all, economics will be important. We will have to make choices. We will have to give up something to get something. And you know, that's the whole trade notion. But it's absolutely true. Economists, when they start banging on what's important, what do you need to know about life in the world, one of the things they're going to say is opportunity cost. What's opportunity cost? About there.
The cost of not doing the next best thing.
Yeah, the cost of not doing the next best thing. And you know, that's a really broad idea. It's hard to think about what is the real cost of something. You know, what's the cost of your being here right now? You got to think about what you really would have been doing. How valuable was it? Is it worthwhile? And you have to, you know, are you willing? Obviously, the cost wasn't as great as the benefit, so you're being here because you're here. That's the other thing economists think. Big part of what tends to get us in trouble with some parts of the world, some parts of the social sciences, is that we assume rationality. So we assume if someone did something, that it was better than the options. And to assume that, you know, you have to assume people have knowledge, that they know what they're doing. You have to also assume that they know what satisfies them, what makes them happy. They have to be able to order things. They have to know what's better. And those sort of sound innocuous when I'm standing up here saying them, but making the assumption that everybody can value everything and can compare them and can make decisions on what's better, you know, is a fairly big jump. So opportunity cost, next best thing you had to give up. What's the opportunity cost, you know, of, what can I think of that's important? What's the opportunity cost of a health insurance plan? You know, then it gets messy. That's when economists get paid a lot of money to spend a lot of time trying to figure out what you gave up. Because for something like what's it cost to be in this class, it's fairly easy to think of what did I give up. When you start thinking about real changes in society, the analysis of what's the real cost and what are the real benefits, you know, is really difficult. Both evaluated at the margin. What does that mean? Why do we care? It's all about the next one. The notion that fixed costs are gone. You spent money, you've spent it. You can't get it back. But what you worry about is if I do one more of something, what's the benefit and what's the cost? And it turns out that one of the reasons economics uses this notion so much is this is basically calculus. It's a problem-solving way to get at maximization, is that you look at units added of things and how much benefit and cost it adds. And so it turns out that the decision rules tend to be about marginal things. They tend to be about, at each unit's decision, you make the decision based on what will happen with that next unit. You don't make the decision based on the whole situation. So I don't decide whether to take another step based on all the steps I've taken this morning on my average steps. I take that step based on what it'll get me, what it costs me. And so I make my decisions as if the past is completely gone and I'm looking only at what happens next. But if what happens next has to do with the past, then that comes into the decision. I mean, it doesn't mean the past goes away, but it just means that you think of what's next. What's the next benefit? What's the next cost? Entrepreneurs. How do entrepreneurs fit into all this? And this one I thought about for a while. Schumpeter said, creative destruction. I tried to think, what are the most important things to tell this group of students about entrepreneurs? And in my mind, from a way economists looks at things, you need things produced, you need to put resources in the right place. The role of the entrepreneurs, they're sitting out there looking to see where the next right place is. They're trying to figure out what is something that people want, what is something I can do better, what is something I can do more cheaply. And they spend a lot of their time, maybe we should feel sorry for them, worrying about this, thinking about it, agitating about what to do next. But if they didn't, all of us would be, if you didn't, all of us would be worse off. So we've got this thing called entrepreneurship that suggests that in reality out there's a lot of people, like you're trying to think of what to do to make things better. Something I could do that would be so good that people will pay me for it. Or it'll be so good we can help make this charity work better or something. But they're looking for opportunities, and they don't have to be paid to look for them. They do it because they want to do it. And then they bring together resources, they bring together often their own money, and they take risk. And they take risk, and as I say in parentheses, they often fail. Think about trying to get an economy that had some central ruler at the center, makes all the decisions. How do you get decisions made, like whether to try something? With entrepreneurship, with a market with lots of thousands of people who have the right and the opportunity to start something, put their money where their mouth is, see if something will work, they do it. You can't stop them, and you don't have to push them into it. You can't get them not to do it. Even though a lot of them fail. And it costs them professionally, personally. It's their own money often. Sometimes they were smart enough to be able to talk other people into financing it. They still lose credibility if they borrow someone else's money or get a backer and they fail. There's a real cost of failure. So we've got this class of people, these entrepreneurs in the economy that are doing the organizing, land, labor, and capital, trying to figure out what will make us a more productive society, what will give us growth and jobs. And they're all doing it without any guidance or anybody telling them to do it, because there's a reward at the end of the rainbow. If you're lucky and you do well, you'll be successful. If it's commercial, you may make a lot of money. If it's a nonprofit or a charity, you'll feel good, or you'll help a lot of people. But it's that drive and the fact that we have people like that that make, an economy that has a lot of entrepreneurship a really dynamic, exciting, and good place. Does it matter what kind of society you're in? Yeah. Are there societies on earth where people are not very free to be entrepreneurs? Yeah. The U.S., I'm not one of these big patriot or running around screaming out, but we have a very great situation here in the sense that you're all free to go out and try to do something. You're also, free to fail. And the rest of us all appreciate it. So what? Sort of summarizing that idea, what do you got to do to come up with one of these ideas? What does something have to be before it will sell, before it will add to the economy, before it will lead to growth? And you got to come up with something that's in one of those categories. And I would suggest that's it. There's no other way you can come up with something entrepreneurial that will actually make enough money to keep the enterprise going whether it's a profit or nonprofit enterprise. It's got to be new, or if it's not new, it has to be new in the sense that it's different and better. Or if it's the same as something else, it has to cost less. And these are three sort of rigid categories, but basically that's what it's all about. You've got to, when you're sitting thinking about things, you got to think that what you're thinking about fits in one of those categories. And if it fits in one of those categories, you have a reasonable chance of doing well. So, sort of what I've already been saying, but part of the secret here, why this works, is that there are lots of them. Lots of people doing this. Out of many people trying things, somebody's going to do something good. And if they do something good, other people will notice and will try to copy it, do it better, do it lower cost. There's a whole dynamism that goes on because there are thousands and thousands of people trying to discover things. And so you find the opportunities. Someone's creative enough to see this little niche that nobody else saw. And again, it's this that leads to this dynamism. It's this that leads to us finding the opportunities. A central planner trying to figure out what do we really need. Sitting in an office, having conferences, talking among themselves, are not going to find most of this stuff. It's the power of large numbers. It's the power of having lots of creative minds trying things. It's also the power, that it's the problem that you might fail. It's the beauty that you might fail in some sense. It's also the beauty that with great numbers, one person failing doesn't bring the society down. A failure is a failure. It hurts a lot. But not only are the ideas spread all over the place, but the failure and the financial costs are spread all over the place. And it tends to make it easier than if you make one big decision for the whole economy. And then if it fails, wow. Think of the Soviet Union. If you do everything together, if you do everything with a central planner, you may hit the right thing and it may be wonderful. Sort of like having a king. A king's great as long as the king does the right things. But it's a lot better to have lots of princes if they all try different things, if some of them are going to fail. So, I'm suggesting markets do this. Not only do markets let anyone do anything they want to do, in some sense, go out there and try it, see if you can sell it. But people get signals. Part of learning what's needed does come from signals from markets. If you see a lot of people are buying something, if the price of something's going up, there's an opportunity perhaps. Prices tend to drive where resources go. So if there's a sector of the economy where people are paying a lot and there are a lot of profits being made, prices are going up in cell phones or something, other entrepreneurs see that as an opportunity. So part of this whole supply and demand thing, this whole prices getting set by what people really buy and what people really produce, is that this gives signals to the people who are looking for what ought to be next. Again, the market allows anyone to fail, secret large numbers, no need for all needing planners. All that was sort of summarizing stuff I already said. So, another economics term, already used in a sense, but here we go again, efficiency. Efficiency just means using things in the best way. So efficiency is not wasting. Efficiency is having the right people in the right jobs. It's having the right companies. It's producing the products that people really want. There are lots of levels of efficiency. In economics, in fact, you talk about both allocative efficiency, which is, are we doing the right things? Are we investing in the right things? And another is technical efficiency in when we do these things, do we do it in the best way, in the technologically most advanced way, in the way that's cheapest? So technical efficiency is about doing the things you do efficiently, cheaply, using as few resources as possible. Allocative efficiency is about, are the resources doing the right things? Are they in the right parts of the economy? Are they in the right markets? Are they in the things that the people really want? Putting this model into practice. When you really get into intermediate micro, into economics, into talking about how economists approach problems. There's almost one simple little two-equation thing that's really the basis of most economic analysis. It starts with an equation that says maximize something, and underneath there will be an equation that says subject to, and it will be a constraint. So it's saying, let's decide what it is we want, and let's build an equation that quantifies that in a mathematical term. Then let's put up an equation that tells us what are the constraints. What are the resource points that keep us from doing all we want, that keep things scarce, that keep us from having everything we want in life. And you know, consumer model is what? What do consumers maximize? Utility. Everybody know the word utility? Strange word, in a sense. It's welfare, it's happiness, it's whatever people want from material things, and you can't really measure it. You certainly can't compare it. You can't compare it across people. You know, if I give two of you an ice cream cone and you both eat it and you both like it, I can't say you got 6 utils and you got 4. You know, how much something pleases someone versus somebody else is not measurable, not comparable. And it makes the analysis hard. It means the real model that you sort of build is about something that you can really only make for each person separately, because you can't compare them very well. It's an interesting problem, and we're not going to get into that today, but for thinking, for abstraction, for thinking about how economists think, the notion is that there's happiness that comes from consuming, and that we can measure it to some extent, and that we will assume that people are trying to maximize it. And yeah, that's a big assumption. That's sort of where, again, the social critics will say, you know, how can we have any sort of tolerance of a social science profession that says what people are all about is maximizing the happiness from consuming? And, you know, fair enough. If that were it, if that were all, if you couldn't talk about other parts on the side, but having a discipline, having a way of looking at those questions, at what are consumers trying to do, how do they do it, it serves us well. And maybe we'll get into that a little bit more, but that's a big part of it is, does it predict well? Does it predict behavior? Do people really behave this way? If we build a model based on this idea that people try to maximize utility, and then we go out and do our best to measure what people do and collect data and see what happens, is their behavior consistent with that model? And it turns out it is, you know, to the best we can do as social sciences. How about businesses? How about producers? What's the objective?
Maximize profit.
Profit. What's in the constraint? Somebody else? So what I put on the bottom line, for the consumer, what was the constraint? It was income, wealth, budget. In a given year, it's income. For producers, it's what? Can you hear her? Resources. Yeah, it's expenditures on resources. So it's resources, value of resources used. So a company's trying to make profits. They're selling products at a price, and they're paying for them at an opportunity cost, at a cost of buying the resources. And they're trying to maximize that, subject to how many resources they put in, you know, how much they invest. So the model on that side is, given a certain size budget of a company, how can they produce the most value? How can they produce the most output? And that one, again, also tends to serve us well. But it's that simple. That's sort of the two main models of economics, is assume that consumers try to maximize utility and they're constrained by their income, and assume that businesses try to maximize profit and they're constrained by the amounts of resources they buy. That's when, on the notion that it's always good to beat into people's heads the thoughts you're trying to convey. Do better, lower cost. That one fits the previous slide, right? If you're trying to make profits, you try to produce something that will sell and that you can sell for a good price. And the way you do that is come up with something, do better, lower price. The answer, and we're not going through the math, we're not even putting up the equations, but the answer in economics is always you go until the marginal benefits equal the marginal cost. So a consumer keeps consuming something until the marginal utility, the marginal happiness from consuming the next unit of that is equal to what they've given up, the marginal cost. The happiness they gave up by not consuming other things in order to consume this thing. So there's sort of the abstract model here is that every consumer thinks about every kind of good and service available in the world, and they go to a point of consuming each one until the next one wouldn't be worth as much as what they'd have to give up somewhere else. And so you get this full budget of what you spent all your money on, such that for every good and service you consume, the benefit per dollar is the same, you know. And that one's kind of neat when you're first started studying economics. Everybody's marginal benefit of everything they're consuming, if you divide it by dollars, how much it costs per dollar is the same. And, you know, that's not true. I mean, it's not exactly, but it's close. If something would give you a lot more happiness for the next dollar, you'd be over there buying it. You wouldn't be buying what you're buying. So if you sort of spent your money, you're pretty happy with it, it pretty much, you know, if you're rational, has to be true, that given what you're buying, nothing that you could buy per dollar would make you happier than what you've bought. And that's what economists assume. We assume people are that smart, that knowing, you know, that able to know what they want. And, you know, does that bother us? No. Close enough. It's not going to be exact. There will be some people that haven't really thought it through or that they didn't quite get to the edge. But in essence, that's where people are. Otherwise, you know, why not? If you're free to buy what you want and you've spent your last dollar on something that gave you less happiness than what you didn't buy with that dollar, you know, there's something wrong. So that's sort of where the modeling goes in economics, is that you go to these margins because it's rational, because it makes you happy, because you do it on purpose. And, you know, again, it goes back to something I was saying about the markets. Nobody had to tell you. The beauty about markets, they have lots of faults. I'm not a market fanatic. I'm not Milton Friedman. But the beauty about markets is they take care of themselves. The beauty about markets is nobody had to tell us all what to buy, so we'd all be sort of at the point where the last thing we bought couldn't be improved upon by buying something different. We just do it. We have a price shown to us. If the price we're willing to pay is less than our neighbor's willing to pay, they'll get it. If we want some, we'll have to bid more. But the beauty of this thing is it comes out in an equilibrium, so everybody's the same in terms of the marginal benefit per dollar, you know, or close. And so it takes care of itself. And this is efficiency. And that's the definition of efficiency, is that, you know, the marginal benefit and the marginal cost for everybody's the same. Why? Because it's not efficient if it's not. You could take a dollar someplace and move it somewhere else, buy somebody something different, change the resource, and they'd be happier. So efficiency means you've gained the ultimate utility. You've maximized it. There's no way you could move resources around and make anybody happier. And, you know, as obviously markets adjust, it takes time. People have to think. People make mistakes. So it's not really like that perfectly in the world, but it really is to a great extent. You can do the empirical work. You can look at people's behavior at the margins. You can look at how much they value things. And markets do a really good job. As long as we don't constrain people from buying what they want to buy, as long as we don't coerce them, as long as we don't steal their money, beat them up, take their resources, you've got, in a market economy that works reasonably well, you've got people pretty much having put their efforts and their money into the things that make everybody happiest. Why did I put this up here? This is to sort of back off. I've been making the case of how wonderful markets are, how great they are, how they make everything perfect.
When everybody acts in self-interest, that might not be the best interest of society as a whole.
Everybody hear what I said? When everybody acts in their self-interest, it may not be in the best interest of the society as a whole. And economists talk about externalities. We talk about a lot of things that cause this not to be true, in some sense, the marginal benefit. But the biggest problem generally tends to be this notion of externalities and public goods. And what's an externality? An externality is a situation where people are affected by buying and selling activities who are not the direct buyer or seller. Okay? And markets don't handle that very well. If I'm buying, you're selling, I'm worried about how much I value this, you're worried about how much it costs you. Neither one of us is worried about if it pollutes. So pollution's the big one. Everybody, when they talk about externalities, the big negative externality is pollution. Because by creating products, you create pollution. And in a purely selfish world, in a world where producers are simply trying to maximize profits, they're not going to worry about pollution. They don't have to pay for it. So their marginal cost probably won't include pollution. If it does, they won't value it enough. And so the market will work. Everybody will be buying and selling. Everybody will be equating their private benefits to their private cost. All the producers will be equating their private profits to their private costs. And you can get some really bad results. You get too little of the things that produce positive externalities. So if there are things that people can do that help other people, but they don't get any direct benefit out of it, they will underdo it. But probably more importantly, because pollution has become a really big problem. So one of the things is pollution is that even a really nice business person is just not going to value pollution to the amount that harms society. This is where government comes in. Government says, okay, you're polluting, we're going to put a tax on it. We're going to put a carbon tax. Then you got to say, how do these bureaucrats, how do these economists figure out the marginal cost of that pollution? And that's hard. But they can make a run at it. They can look at this industry, look at given levels of output, how much pollution is created. They can look at the health data and see how many people get sick. They could put a number on there, tax these bad things, tax the negative externality, and then you could say markets work perfectly. So, the economist who wants to be happy with markets as getting all the answers right has to say, well, if there are externalities, either positive or negative, somehow we have to find a way to make people behave different from just considering their private interest. We have to make them consider the social benefits and the social cost. Smoking, smoking in a room. What do? We don't tax it, we forbid it. Economists always say the best thing with any such negative or positive externality is to subsidize or tax. But in reality, sometimes it's easier just to forbid something. Make a rule that you can't do it, because taxing it becomes very hard, measuring it becomes very hard. So we don't tax killing people, we make it illegal. It's a really big negative externality, to shoot someone. And even if you're willing to pay, whatever the government would decide is the social cost of that, we probably wouldn't let you. This is going back over, I'm beating on a few things here, but what do markets do? Every market, what does every economy have to do? It has to decide three things: what gets produced, how it gets produced, and for whom it gets produced. And again, talking about how does if a market actually works very well, and you've taken care of the problems by regulation, taxes, whatever, why do economists so much think markets are great? So what's the what? What gets produced in a market economy? If it's working well?
Goods and services.
Okay, but which goods and services? The ones people will pay for, right? Okay, what is whatever people will pay for? That's the demand. So, and resources follow. If people are buying something, companies will produce it. So what gets produced is what people can pay for. And that's where you say, wait a minute. So the rich get to make all the decisions here. I mean, if you got money, you get what you want. And yeah, that's sort of true. Because the idea is, how do you get money? Until you try, we may try to fix it. We may try to fix the income distribution, but for purely efficiency reasons, the people that have the money to get the what, the people that can spend more and have more things, had to have produced more things. They had to have resources that they sold or used to produce products which sold for a lot of money. So what gets produced goes to those who produce. And if markets aren't working quite right and somebody gets a lot of money without producing things, without being smart and creating things, or without working hard, 40 hours, whatever, then it won't be fair. But in essence, if I have a certain amount of labor, I put it out for bids. I go into the market and sell it to someone. Who do I sell it to? I sell it to the company that will pay me the most. Who will pay me the most to work for them? The person for whom I produce the most that they can sell. Because they're not going to pay me money just to have me come and look pretty in their office, as pretty as I am. They're going to pay me if I can come and do something that helps them to sell something. And so if I own land, if I own, coal, whatever, I sell it to whoever bids the most for it. And why do they bid most for it? Because what they're going to use it for can be sold for more than what the next bidder who was bidding for it bid. So everything's valued by its opportunity value. And, if you aren't worried about some unfairness, some luck, whatever, then that's pretty fair. The ones who had resources that are valuable, the ones that get more education so they can sell their labor hours for more money are richer. And they get to decide more of the what than the people who aren't as rich. And again, we can come back to that in political ways to try to fix it if it becomes too bad. But the basic notion's very fair. If you have highly productive resources and add to the pot, you get a lot of the pot when it gets sorted out. How's a little different the way you go through this notion of how market economies work. How do you produce things? The best way. Because part of the assumption in these models, before you start saying, but if it didn't work that well, if we didn't have knowledge. But the thing is that everybody has knowledge. So in the basic economic model, there are no patents. There are no controlling things. If somebody knows a better way to do it, you'll know what they're doing. And if it works better, you'll do it too. So, that's oversimplified, obviously, but it's an interesting starting point. So in the real perfectly operating competitive market, the how is going to be the best way, because if you don't know, you'll figure it out. Why? Because if you don't know and don't figure it out, you'll go broke. Right? That person will be doing it in a cheaper way than you, and they'll be selling the same product cheaper than you. Then they can underbid you, and they'll run you out of business. So if you're not producing the most efficient way, you'll go broke. That's sort of a direct message to entrepreneurs. If you're going to be an entrepreneur and you're going to produce something, you better produce it in the most efficient, cost-effective way, or you won't be successful because somebody will produce it more efficiently, more cost effectively than you will, and they will get the customers. For whom? For whom sort of, what again? The for whom is those people that decide what gets produced. So the people with money get to decide what they buy, and they're the ones that get to decide it. So the first one and the last one are sort of the same. It's the people who had resources, sold them for money, and so forth, get the goods and services. And what those goods and services are is whatever they want, whatever they bid for in markets and pay for. Summary. Talked about external. What's public good? Somebody hasn't said something. Okay, but what's the definition of a public good?
Something that the government owns that everyone needs. It's not like a privatized at all.
Okay, that's not the economic definition.
Good that's non-rival and non-exclusive.
Non-rival, non-exclusive. That's the real. He's had economics. What does non-rival mean? Means yeah, if I have it, you have it too. And the second is if I have it, I probably can't stop you from having it. So a pure public good is something that if it's national defense is the one everybody can ever come up with. If I were to buy national defense privately myself, go out and spend my money for a jet, you would get the benefit of that jet just like I would if you live in the country and I protected the borders. And I couldn't stop you. If I wanted to do it to protect myself, I couldn't stop you from being protected. So it's a good in which everyone shares it if it's done, and you can't police that. You can't make them pay. So public goods tend to be national defense, law and order, clean water, in some sense, clean air. And they're free. I mean, if they get produced, everybody gets to consume them. So nobody's going to pay for it. The bottom line of that one is that nobody will voluntarily pay for it. Government sent you a letter saying, okay, how much do you want to spend, how much do you want to send in taxes for national defense this year? And what would you say? You'd say nothing. You benefit from it, but you wouldn't offer to pay. Why? You'd think everybody else was going to pay. So the public goods, the whole notion is everybody tries to be a free rider. They're hoping that a lot of rich people or a lot of their friends or whatever will buy some parks and buy some national defense and buy clean water, and they'll get to benefit from it. But the amount they lose by not kicking in their little bit to the big pool of money used for national defense doesn't cut it much, but it's really great to them. They save a lot of money for an individual sense. So the notion of public goods is this is sort of positive externalities taken to the extreme, that it's all externality. Nobody really consumes it. Anybody who buys it is buying it for everybody. So it's all affecting everybody, not just the person who buys it. That's the other one. The other kind of things are things like monopoly. What's the problem with monopoly? Monopolies don't produce enough products and they charge too high a price. We don't have time, we're not going to get into that. But the two that I want you to remember, the one I really want you to remember is externalities. Because in a sense, public goods is just an extreme case of good externalities. Everybody gets it if anybody pays for it. And monopoly, what's the problem? How do you fix a monopoly? What do we do in this country? We do two things. One, we try to break it down. We make it illegal. We use the Sherman Antitrust Act and we say you can't be a monopoly. We'll start 4 more companies to compete with you. That won't work for what's called a natural monopoly, in which the bigger you are, the cheaper you can produce, like public utilities. Doesn't make any sense to have 6 different companies putting up power lines. on the streets. It's better to have one regulated monopoly and let other people, you know, chip into those lines or whatever. But you let there just be one set of power lines and you regulate it. So we either regulate or we try to break it up. Neither one's worked very well, but that's past our topic for today. Real world problems. What? It's all about trade-offs. It's all this opportunity cost thing. I want to make the case, this line of reasoning that you do anything till the marginal benefits equal the marginal cost pretty much fits for any kind of problem you want to think about. Think of all the world's biggest problems. You pollute something, you pollute the water until the marginal benefit of pollution, if there are benefits, if it does do things for people, the activity that pollutes, you go till the marginal benefit equals the marginal cost, and that might be a little bit of pollution or it might be a fair amount. It's probably not going to be zero. There's probably some value to the activities that pollute that are more valuable than it would be to stop it. But that way of thinking, you know, goes to almost any big question is going to have an economic analysis. It's going to come down to sort of do this till the marginal benefits equal the marginal cost. For an entrepreneur, you know, what is it? It's according to what you're trying to start. But you sit down and try to think about what are the benefits to me of doing this and put numbers on them. And then you think about what are the costs. And part of the benefit of this way of thinking is it just makes you sit down and think about them. What are all the benefits? What are all the costs? Are there social ones? What is being given up, you know, on the cost side? I think I'm going to quit. I had a couple more sort of statistical things here, but we're to the point that we need to do the poll and finish the class. So, well, let me look real quickly at the next slide for you. Okay, yeah, this is the marginal benefit, marginal cost. Takeaways. Started out talking about resources. That's the constraint as far as economics is concerned. We can't do everything. We have to make choices. I try to make the case that when markets work really well, even sort of well, they tend to be efficient. They tend to put the resources in the right places. There can be market failure because the social benefits and cost, and you probably need some big brother, you need government, you need something to force behavior on people if you want efficiency. If government's going to do things like this, if government's going to take on activities, government itself ought to do benefit cost analyses. We started doing these more and more in recent years. It started with, what was his name, the Secretary of Defense, McNamara. McNamara started in the Defense Department. Everybody had to do the benefits and cost in great detail of any project they wanted to undertake. If not, you know, how does the government decide what's efficient? How do they know the marginal benefits, marginal cost? You don't get that out of voting. And that's another topic, and we're not going to have time to spend it today, but government needs to put the plans before the voters that are at the levels of these kinds of things the government's doing that equate the benefits and the costs. Then the whole economy is efficient, because if the market's taking care of the parts where markets work, and the government uses something like benefit cost analysis so that they equate benefits and cost, you get an overall efficient economy. Fairness is another question. We could spend a lot of time, and we will spend some time talking about fairness, equity, with a philosopher and with other people in this course. But part of the point is this is not what economics is about. Economics thinks they can give you the efficiency answers. You can tell them how much fairness you want, and they can tell you what the efficiency answers are. Or they can tell you, you know, if you do this, it may do this to fairness by analyzing data. But economics is really not about fairness. Economics is about efficiency.